Hi there, this is Linda and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to share with you some ideas for vertical weekly spreads like in the Hobonichi Cousins. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Okay, so I spent 3 years in a Hobonichi Cousin and I have two completed cousins and one completed avec system, which is exactly the same as a Hobonichi Cousin, just split into 2 books for 2025, because look at how chunky 2024 got. 2023 was not quite as chunky because I didn't glue nearly as much stuff in as I was finding my style. But I wanted to share with you guys today a specific look at how I do vertical weeklies, or just some ideas for vertical weeklies. So first, I just want to start with 2024 because this is kind of the style that I used for the longest. So let me just find where the weeklies start. So I'm just going to quickly flip through these. And I do have full flip throughs of these actual planners on my channel. So if you want to just see a full flip through, then you can definitely check those out. I will link them in the description box below. But you can see here what I did for this, basically this entire year, was use this to write down what I had done every day. I decorated my spreads. I tended to add stickers in. I used a lot of Coffee Monsterz Co. But essentially my goal with these spreads was to keep track of what happened every day so that I would have it for reference when I was working on Project Life or backfilling journal pages or other scrapbooking projects. This kind of gave me a recap of what had happened. So if I wanted to go back and create a weekly spread in Project Life 2 months later, then I had these to fall back on. And you can see there were a couple weeks where I fell off. And like here, I switched up the sticker brand I was using, but still pretty much the same for the entire year. Okay, so let's move back to 2023. So this year, this is when I first started in the Hobonichi Cousin. And I did not know what I wanted to do with these vertical weeklies. I had not used vertical weeklies much before. I think I had used them in a few older planners, but I hadn't used them in a cousin. And at the time, I was thinking I would use these as a functional planner. So you can see I have a row down here for task lists. I have my meal planning. I have a to-do list. And then I'm filling in my schedule. But what I found was there was a lot of blank space. And so I tried to fill it in by having a little fun decorating it. And it just didn't stick. It felt like too time consuming and not fun. And I didn't like it. So then I started trying to play around with collaging and adding in ephemera. You can see how I started doing stuff and then kind of fell off. And it definitely mixed up a lot. But here, I think I started to kind of find my style as a little bit more fun in here, filling in more details. I'm still using it as a task list, and there's a lot just kind of evolving throughout these spreads as I'm working through this is when I'm starting to sort of go back in and fill it in as a record of my day. And I think this is probably around the time when I realized, hey, I need that. Because prior to using the Hobonichi Cousin, I was tracking what I did every day in a digital app called Day One. And that was what I would use as a reference for my scrapbooking. But I decided to get rid of doing that and move purely analog. And then you can see really here how I did that. And I got really started to kind of evolve to that 2024 style. Here I did a lot of doodles, some more doodles. And then you can see I kind of fell off that because it was too time consuming. So I switched to stamps, which is a great alternative. And then I started having more fun collaging, playing with little pieces in here. Not every week, but I have a lot more just collage style. So I'm definitely still using it functionally to keep track of what happened, but adding decor in. And I think as I did these spreads, I did them kind of as the week went on. So I would add to it. Some was pre-planned and some was after the week. Another idea that I did just once, but I highly would recommend everyone does this at some point, and I will do it again. I hope to have a video for you sharing this type of spread, but essentially what I did here is time tracking. So if you ever worry that you're spending too much time scrolling or you don't know where your time goes, I highly recommend doing this. And this is essentially, I color coded all of the activities that I do, and I time blocked what I was doing. You can see sometimes there's multiple things, and that's because I was probably like watching TV and eating lunch, something like that. So there's multitasking, or maybe spending time with my significant other and watching TV and scrolling. So you can see kind of that, and I have the key separate. I didn't want to share it at the time, but you can just kind of see that from looking at this, I could tell where my time was going. And it's such a good kind of like self-audit to figure out where your time's going. Plus, it's a super fun way to use your spread. Moving into last year. So when I moved into here, I kind of continued that style I was doing in 2024, where I have just kind of a list of what I did with icons, stickers. But I really started to get bored with this. Like, it was really just a little tedious for me to always have to fill in. And so I wanted to mix it up. There's just a few more spreads with this style. You can see I also mixed up what pen I was using, and I had started bringing in a variety of different sticker brands and also adding in doodles because I wanted to kind of switch it up. And I really like how this style came out, but I was just getting bored. So I decided to mix it up and add in photos. And this is kind of what I do now in my take a note, but it's essentially a recap of what happened with photos from the week. And I really loved this, but ultimately I decided to fall off of it because it was really time consuming and it was repetitive of what I was doing in my take a note. If you're curious about that, I have separate videos for my take a note just to kind of see how my style has evolved. But for this video, I wanted to share more about like what you could do in these vertical weeklies. So to do this, I would print these photos pretty small so that they could kind of fit in the day that they happened with just a little bit of overflow. And then I filled in the rest with notes about what happened. I added in stickers and sometimes doodles. This was the week that I documented week in the life, so I didn't need to add any additional words. So I just did photos and a title. Here I tried to add in kind of what was going on in the news as a mix up. And here I did back to my regular style that I had been using. However, as I finished up this journal and moved into this one, I was done with that style. And at that point, I'd already decided that I wasn't going to do vertical weeklies anymore in 2026, but I wanted to do something in here. And so what I decided to do was something different every week. So here I did just one item from the day, and I did it with a mild liner marker, and it's just kind of a recap. And this was super quick and easy, and I could probably keep up with this every week if I wanted to. So this is a very simple way to do a vertical weekly. Here I just decided to do like a washi tape per day that kind of fit with what was going on that day, something that happened that day. So like this day I probably got takeout. This day was probably a rough day, a busy day at home, exhausted day, burned out. So I just kind of picked a washi that represented that day. Here I picked a song of the day. And so I doodled in like the name of the song, the artist, and then a quote from the song. So sometimes it was something I listened to. Sometimes it was something that made me think of kind of what was going on in my life at the time. It was just kind of a fun way to document the day. I decided to do an exercise and fitness spread. So for this one, I documented how many steps I got each day and what workouts I did. Then I did everything I ate. So this is a great way to do a meal tracker if you really wanted to document your eating, especially if you are someone who's tracking this regularly. You can use a vertical weekly to do this. So I document my breakfast, my lunch, my dinner, and snacks. You could do all sorts of health tracking in a vertical weekly. You could definitely also mix the fitness and the diet, like the food, all into one and make it just kind of like a health tracker. Here I did the weather, which is kind of fun to see. I think that this would be fun too if you wanted to do this more long term, to also kind of reflect on the weather, or you could do like your outfits that match like what was going on outside. Here I did a kind of like time schedule. So I just kind of tried to like block out where my time was going to go. And I did this ahead of time to try to prompt myself to do things. And I ended up not doing a lot of them and crossing them out, but it was a good idea. I decided to document all the media that I consumed. So I printed out screenshots of the covers, and that was more time consuming than it needed to be. I think I could have just written it out or doodled it. But this way I saw like everything I watched or read that day. Things that were causing me anxiety. I think that this was such a good spread. Maybe not something I want to do every single week, but it was fun every day to just kind of brain dump like what was stressing me out at that point. This one, I just kind of used it to write out what was happening each day, but I just flipped it sideways. This is something I saw Randi.plans do. And so I just decided to take that idea and kind of run with it. And then I added some stickers along the bottom to match what was going on that day. This one, I decided to use it as a spending tracker. And I've seen a lot of people do this in like the Hobonichi weeks. I don't think I've ever seen someone else do it in the vertical weekly, but you could definitely use this very easily as a spending tracker. I had fun with it and doodled what I purchased, but if you wanted to do this purely for like tracking purposes, I think this would be a really good way to track your finances. For this week, I decided to do gratitudes. I use the Ritex sign brush pens every day to write down little gratitudes from the day. I tried to not repeat myself later in the week, but I did end up repeating myself a couple times because I totally forgot that it was already on the list. But just writing out the little things that I was grateful for during the day. Okay, this one was a little bit weird, but what I decided to do was a page recipe. So if you flip to these corresponding daily pages in my journal, this is what I used on that page. So I put like what swatch of any washies I used. I swatched out markers that I used. If I had extra stickers, like this one I had 2 of the stickers, so I put it here. Just different things like that, just to kind of, and I wrote out like what pen I was using, which I thought was just kind of a fun idea. Okay, so here we went on a trip. So while traveling, I wanted to do it where I just kept track of what I did every day. So it was totally functional because I wanted to know what I was doing each day on my trip. So when I got back, I could fill in journaling that I hadn't finished, and I could document in a travel album. For the rest of the spread though, I didn't really need anything else, but I needed just some extra lists. So you can totally ignore the lines in a vertical weekly and instead just use this as a place for whatever lists and notes you need from the week. Okay, so then when I got back, I decided to take some inspiration from some people on the internet, because not every idea has to come from you. You can definitely see what you like online and take some inspiration from others. So this spread was inspired by Jen Boom Creates, and she is over on Instagram. She does not have a YouTube channel, although I hope that she starts one someday. And she documents in her vertical weeklies with doodles and text of just kind of like everything or highlights of the day. So I had a lot of fun doing that this week. It was so much fun, and I love the spread. It was so time consuming. I don't know how she does it. For this week, I decided to document my New York Times games. If you have followed me on Instagram for a while, you know I'm obsessed with the New York Times games. I do the connection and the wordle every single morning. I used to share my connection scores on my Instagram stories every day. I stopped after like doing that for about a year because I feel like it became tedious for people who didn't do it, but I still play it every day. And I had a lot of fun for this spread, just documenting what my score was in terms of the colors without actually writing down the words. This paper is from the New York Times. They have like wrapping paper or gift wrap that is New York Times games inspired, and it is actually newsprint, which is a nice touch. And I put some of that in here. Okay, here back to inspiration from others online. This spread was inspired by Helen from the Coffee Monsterz Co. When she does her vertical weeklies, she uses the same format every week where she tracks kind of what she does, what she's going to do and what she did. So sometimes it's pre-planning and sometimes it is reflective, but it's kind of like a schedule. And so I did that in her style, and I used a lot of these like little, the mini like planner icons from her, which I thought was a good way to kind of use some of those, and it was super fun. And I like how this turned out, but again, it was so time consuming. Here I decided to just play with some products. So I decided to do a rainbow across the week, and I just had fun swatching out my washi. I definitely could have just filled the whole thing with washi. I used some Sharpie Creative markers to create some titles up here. And then I used my Tombow Twin Tones just to highlight a few of the things that happened that day. For this spread, I decided to collect ephemera throughout the week and collage it. This is such like a junk journal spread and a great way to use your vertical weekly. You don't have to stick in the columns. Essentially, I just kind of put things kind of near where they happened, but sometimes they would overlap onto other things. And here I can just see so many things that happened this week. And it was just fun. It's fun to find all these little pieces of life and stick them in here. It did add a lot of bulk. So if you were going to do this every week, you would probably end up with a very chunky Hobonichi Cousin. If you are familiar with the Hobonichi Cousin, you know that it can handle that, and you can definitely make it super chunky, but just something to keep in mind. I also have had some questions recently about people who want to get into journaling and don't have a very big budget. Everything on here is stuff I already had because it's all like junk from my life. So a lot of packaging and stuff, and this is cut out from magazines. So you can just get some old magazines and basically you need scissors and glue, and that's it, because it's just stuff from your life. For this week, I decided to just kind of use this as a brain dump spot for what was on my mind, but I was so busy that I didn't really use it very much. And then going into December, if you're not new to my channel, you probably have seen my December Daily series this year. If you haven't, then December Daily is a project where I document one story per day from December 1st through the 25th in a mini album. This is inspired by Ali Edwards, who started this project, and there's a whole community of people who put together December Dailies every year. And I will link in the description box below my playlist from this year if you want to check it out. To help me put together my December Daily, I decided to add in stamped story numbers and then write my story per day in here. I fell off of it and started just putting them in my album instead, but I liked it in theory, and it was an idea that definitely could have helped, especially if I wasn't going to put my album together in the moment, but instead was going to put it together later. Okay, so no matter how you want to do your vertical weeklies, the vertical weekly spread is a great place for planning, for journaling, or for tracking a specific thing or everything in general. You can add photos, you can add collage, you can add doodles, you can add stickers. There are so many ideas for different ways that you can document your life in a vertical weekly spread. Let me know in the comments down below if there are ways that you like to document your vertical weeklies that I haven't shared, and let's start a conversation. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. And as always, I hope to see you guys all in the next one. Bye.